You're afraid you're losing your hair. You're afraid it's getting worse. But every treatment out there seems too good to be true. That's because they often are. You followed the advice, you waited a few months, and nothing really changed.
God damn it. Please, just a little.
Just give it back. I need it.
Please.
No! Damn it!
Why can't I just fix this?
What the?
One miracle, that's all I ask. One request. I'll do anything. Please just bring it back. I didn't mean it when I was young. I'm sorry.
I've been there too. Most people are told hair loss has one cause and one solution. So when a treatment doesn't work, the conclusion is that you're a non-responder. But the truth is, what works for one person might actually accelerate hair loss in another. That topical treatment might be increasing scalp inflammation and irritation. That cure-all shampoo might be contributing to more hair loss. And most companies don't care. They just want to convince you that their product is the magic solution for everyone. And it's undeniably discouraging. You're following all the right steps, spending time and money, and still not getting results. But that doesn't mean you're destined to lose your hair. It means your plan is incomplete. Usually because one or two key drivers were never addressed. I'm not a dermatologist, but I started going down this rabbit hole after noticing my own hair thinning. Even as a physician, I didn't fully understand how complex hair loss was until it started happening to me. And the truth is, most doctors get surprisingly little education on hair loss. Throughout my entire medical school and residency training, I received exactly one lecture on it, and I'm not exaggerating. So let's get to the root, pun intended, of why so many hair treatments don't work and the core drivers that actually determine outcomes. Because once you understand those, hair loss stops feeling random and you can finally make sense of what to do next. One of the biggest mistakes people make with hair loss is assuming it's a single condition with a single cause. In reality, hair loss is almost always multifactorial. A simple way to think about it is this. Hair growth is like water flowing through a hose. If the hose has a single kink, flow slows. But if it has multiple kinks and you only fix one, water still doesn't get through. Hair loss works the same way. You might have a hormonal component, you might have inflammation, that redness and irritation I mentioned before, you might have nutritional deficiencies, scalp issues, medication effects, stress, or underlying medical conditions. And most people don't have just one of these, they have a few layered on top of each other. This is why two people can look identical in the mirror, each with the same pattern and the same thinning, yet still need completely different treatments. It's also why the exact same treatment can help one person and actually make things worse for another. If you treat hair loss without understanding which drivers are actually involved, you're essentially guessing. And guessing leads to wasted time, wasted money, and stalled results. Here's the problem. Hair loss usually has multiple causes, but most plans only focus on one. You're prescribed finasteride and minoxidil, and then you're told to wait 6 months. And to be clear, this approach isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Finasteride targets hormones, minoxidil targets growth signaling, but neither one tells you why your hair loss started in the first place or what else might be limiting progress. So, when results plateau, or never really show up, you're left thinking the treatment failed. In reality, the framework failed. Partial inputs produce partial outcomes. If hair loss is driven by inflammation, nutritional deficiencies, scalp health issues, or an underlying medical condition, then no amount of waiting will fix it. You can't outwait a missing diagnosis. And this is exactly how people end up labeled as non-responders, when in reality, one or two major drivers were just never addressed. Which brings us to the step that almost always gets skipped: proper evaluation. Most people jump straight to treatment without ever stopping to ask a more basic question. What's actually driving my hair loss? Remember the hose analogy from earlier? This is the moment where most people keep twisting at random parts of the hose without ever taking the blindfold off to see where the kinks actually are. A real evaluation goes far beyond just looking in the mirror or eyeballing a receding hairline. It should include things like the pattern and timeline of your hair loss, your medical and family history, hormonal and lifestyle factors, and the health of your scalp and skin. This matters because hair loss isn't just cosmetic. It's often a reflection of what's happening underneath the surface. Without this kind of workup, you're essentially guessing. And guessing is exactly how people end up with treatments that don't work for them. In my previous video, I went much deeper into this, but the short version is simple. If you don't identify the drivers, you can't build a plan that actually works. And this is what explains so many called non-responders. The issue usually isn't treatment resistance, it's that the treatment was never matched to the problem in the first place. If this resonates, then check out that video as well after this. You can find it linked below. It goes deeper into the framework and helps you understand which drivers actually matter for you, so you're not guessing or chasing the wrong treatments. This is where most people get stuck, not because they lack effort, but because they never step back to organize the problem. When treatments fail, the instinct is to add more, right? More supplements, more shampoos, more protocols, but stacking these without a framework just adds noise. When you organize hair loss properly, something interesting happens. Almost every effective plan, no matter how different it looks on the surface, is addressing the same 5 core drivers. Let's start with one that almost all of us begin with: hormones. It's where I started, and it's where most people think the story ends. Treatments like finasteride and dutasteride work by lowering DHT, which is one of the main signals that causes hair follicles to shrink over time. And for many people, this does help, especially early on. But here's the part that's often misunderstood. Blocking DHT doesn't automatically mean regrowth. Hair loss isn't just about how much DHT you have. It's about how sensitive your follicles are to that signal and what happens downstream once that signal is triggered. This explains why medications can seem like they're working and then plateau. The signal is reduced, but the follicle environment hasn't fully recovered. I used to think that if I just controlled DHT, the rest would take care of itself. That assumption is exactly where many people get stuck. Because while hormonal control is important, suppression alone is rarely sufficient, and it overlooks a pretty serious driver. So while medications like finasteride and dutasteride can control hormones, they overlook a serious driver: inflammation. Scalp inflammation is one of the most common reasons that hair loss treatments stall. Hair follicles don't function well in a hostile environment. If the scalp is irritated or inflamed, progress slows or stops altogether, even if hormones are controlled. And inflammation doesn't just come from the scalp itself. Systemic inflammation elsewhere in the body can send mixed signals to the follicle, disrupting normal growth cycles. This is one of the drivers people don't think about until everything else stops working. What surprised me the most when I started digging deeper was that treatments themselves can actually contribute to the problem. For example, topical minoxidil formulations contain propylene glycol, which can irritate the scalp and trigger local inflammation. Microneedling is intentional inflammation, and when done properly, it can help, but too frequently, too deeply, or without proper recovery, it can do more harm than good. Even medicated shampoos like ketoconazole can be a double-edged sword. They can reduce inflammation, but they can also dry out the scalp and cause irritation if overused. This was one of the most counterintuitive things I learned. When inflammation is part of the picture, the exact same treatment can grow hair for one person and accelerate loss in another. And when inflammation goes unaddressed, it becomes the limiting factor no matter what else you're doing. Which brings us to the next driver: growth signaling. Hair follicles cycle through different phases: growth, rest, and shedding. Many treatments are designed to push follicles back into the growth phase, and when the follicle is healthy and ready, that can work really well. But here's the mistake: more stimulation isn't always better. If follicles are already stressed, inflamed, or not ready to cycle, pushing harder can actually backfire. That's why some people suddenly notice more shedding, more irritation, or completely stalled progress after starting or intensifying treatment. It feels like things are getting worse even though they're doing everything right. Growth signaling is highly context dependent. The follicle has to be in the right state to respond. This is why a treatment like minoxidil can work incredibly well for one person and seem to do absolutely nothing for someone else, even when they're both using it correctly. Without addressing the conditions that enable growth, stimulation alone doesn't move the needle, which is where many otherwise solid plans start to fall apart. There are still 2 more drivers that most people miss. The next one is one of the biggest reasons treatments feel like they're doing nothing. Sometimes hair loss isn't the primary problem. It's actually a symptom. You're probably like,
wait, what?
Let me explain. Underlying conditions can quietly drive hair loss in the background, including nutritional deficiencies, hormone imbalances, medical conditions, or even certain medications, including birth control. In these situations, treatment isn't necessarily wrong, it's just being asked to solve a problem it wasn't designed to fix. If your body is low on key nutrients, dealing with chronic stress, or managing an underlying health issue, hair growth often gets deprioritized. I learned this the hard way. Hair is one of the first things your body is willing to sacrifice when something else is even slightly off. So you can be doing everything right on paper, like taking medications, using topicals, following protocols, and still see limited results.
Please.
Progress is usually capped until the underlying issue is addressed. This is why some people feel like nothing works no matter what they try. Not because they failed, but because the real driver was never treated. Even if you've identified the right drivers, treatments take real time. I'm talking several months, not weeks. What makes it harder is that hair loss isn't static. Your scalp changes, your tolerance changes, your response changes. So a plan can make sense early, but not in 6 months. This stood out once I started digging deeper into how people follow these treatments. In medicine, we call this adherence or compliance. And most people don't fail because they quit. They fail because their plan was never designed to evolve alongside their body and scalp. And there's another piece people underestimate here: measurement. If you're relying on the mirror alone, it's incredibly difficult to know whether anything is working. Hair grows slowly, changes are subtle, and when you can't see progress, confidence drops and people stop. Even trained dermatologists can't reliably see changes in hair growth until it's about a 10 to 15% difference. And because hair grows so slowly, waiting cuts both ways. You spend 6 months on an incomplete plan and end up losing ground, or quit too early when something was actually working. And this is where having an actual imaging tool really helps with motivation. When you can consistently image the same areas of the scalp at the same magnification over time, you're no longer guessing, you're measuring. It's the same reason we track weight loss using a scale or strength gains in the gym based on how much weight we can lift. Seeing objective data, even small improvements, keeps you engaged long enough for results to actually show up, or let you know that your diet or workout routine isn't working. However, the feedback loop for hair loss is 6 to 12 months to see visible growth, assuming you're on the right treatment plan to begin with. Without a fast feedback loop, most plans aren't built to be sustained, monitored, or adjusted over time. Hair loss is ongoing, so the plan has to be ongoing too. When you put this together, a bigger issue becomes pretty clear. Most people aren't failing because they're destined to be bald. They're failing because they don't have the data to understand which treatments actually work for their situation. Hair loss is dynamic. The drivers change. And without a way to evaluate what's happening, track progress, and adjust over time, you're not just leaving growth on the table or in the sink, you might be losing more hair while thinking you're actually growing it. So the ideal approach can't be static. In a perfect world, hair loss management would work like this. You start with a real evaluation to understand what's actually driving your hair loss. You track objective changes over time instead of just relying on the mirror. And as your biology responds, the plan gets adjusted, not guessed at, not stacked blindly, but refined based on data. Having that kind of structure early on would have made the process far clearer and less frustrating for me. And that's exactly why I ended up investing in Dermos, not just using them as a customer, but also putting my own money behind the company after years of researching in the space. What they do is simple, but surprisingly rare. Diagnostics first. They track progress objectively over time using their dermoscan imaging so you can tell whether your plant is actually growing hair, often within the first 30 days. And they adjust the plan as your biology changes instead of sending you the same kit every month forever. The dermatologists behind Dermos are confident enough in their process that for people who qualify and follow the plan, they back it up with a free hair transplant through a partner clinic if the treatment doesn't work. In other words, if you don't hit the growth targets you set together, they take the financial hit, not you. As the founder told me, if this doesn't work, nothing will. So the next best step is a hair transplant. The good news for those trying to avoid a hair transplant is that to date, Dermos has never needed to give a hair transplant as they have consistently met their growth targets, helping patients rapidly grow their hair without surgery. They're also honest about who they can and cannot help. Part of their process is deciding whether your case actually has a high probability of success. If your odds aren't great, they'll tell you upfront and honestly. For this video, Dermos put together a one-on-one hair growth roadmap call for my viewers. It's a 40 to 60 minute deep dive where they map your timeline, audit what you've tried, identify which drivers are in play, and outline a clear path for what to do next. This is the same session they normally charge $200 for. The first 200 people who use the link below in the description get it completely free. Now, last time we did this, the free slots were gone in just a couple of days. So if this has been on your mind, grab a slot now. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code you see on the screen. Bald, thinning, or thriving, much love my friends, and I'll see you in that next one.